All right, our next section is Fast Track, Amplifying the Radon Message. It will be presented by Chrysan Cronin, Lindi Campbell, and Kyle Hoylman, who will share with us their cancer journeys that brought them to the projects that they will share with you. First up is Chrysan, and she is a professor of public health at Muhlenberg College in Allentown, PA, where she also directs a public health program. Welcome, Chrysan. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And hi, everybody. I'm going to share some slides with you in just a minute, but I just want to thank AARST for inviting me to talk to you today about one of the projects that has come out of some of my radon research. So I'm going to share my slides with you, and then we'll get going. All right, so the title of this talk is Raising Radon Awareness and Communicating Risk, the Challenges and Solutions in a Bilingual Population. And as I was introduced, I am actually a professor at Muhlenberg College in Allentown, which is in Pennsylvania, which is a pretty hot spot for radon. So first, a little bit of background about what I'm going to show you in terms of my risk communication program, how it all came about. So for those of you who don't know where Pennsylvania is, it's in the northeast part of the United States, and we're right up there in zone 1. And, you know, we got a big problem up there. We sit on top of the Reading Prong, and, you know, radon seems to find its way into most of our homes. In fact, in Pennsylvania, 49 out of 67 counties have radon levels higher than the national average. Now, my research is done in Lehigh County, which is in the eastern part of Pennsylvania, and it has some of the highest levels of indoor radon ever reported in the United States. You may have heard about this a couple of years ago. Allentown is actually the third biggest city in the state of Pennsylvania, and Allentown is located in Lehigh County. So I have a nice research lab right outside my doorstep of my office. In October of 2016, the highest level of radon ever recorded indoors in the state of Pennsylvania was found in a newly constructed house in Center Valley, which is right outside the city limits of Allentown. And that level was 6,176 picocuries per liter. This made us a bit of radon celebrities for a very brief amount of time. You can see that that was October of 2016, and then we had an election in November of 2016, and no one ever talked about the radon levels again after that election. However, it prompted me to do some investigating to see what the levels of radon were typically in Allentown, Pennsylvania, where I work. So luckily the state has on file the radon tests that have been conducted, and I was able to break these radon test results down by zip code. Allentown has 5 major zip codes, and I noticed an interesting trend. I noticed that 2 of the zip codes had much higher rates of radon testing than 3 other ones of the zip codes, and I wanted to understand why. I don't live in Allentown. I wasn't completely familiar with the demographics of Allentown until I started doing this research. And what I found out when I looked at some of the other determinants was that in the zip codes with the lower testing rates, the predominant population identified as Hispanic. Now, 52% of the population in Allentown identifies as Hispanic. So they are the majority population. And predominantly live in these 3 zip codes. I also saw that the median income in those zip codes was considerably lower than the other 2 zip codes. And you can see there the 101 and 102 zip codes and the 109 zip codes have significantly lower income levels. And also that the percent of renters in those zip codes with the low testing rates was quite high. In 101, it was 92%. In 102, it was 65%, and in 109, it was 47%. So I had all of these things to ponder, and one of the things I wanted to know is, I wonder if language barriers have anything to do with, testing rates. And the way that I decided to find that out was I designed a survey and actually went out and surveyed 551 Allentown residents in the beginning of 2017, both people who identified as Latino and people who identified as non-Latino, and I had a pretty good balance of what the actual population, the general population in Allentown looked like. I had 5 research students helping me do this. We did face-to-face interviews using iPads. We asked 39 questions, and the first one was, have you ever heard of radon? And if the participant said yes, we would continue with one set of questions. And if the participant said no, we would jump right to the demographic questions and be finished. So the interviewers, I had 3 native Spanish speaking interviewers and 2 bilingual interviewers, and myself, that's not particularly bilingual, but I actually did some of those interviews in Spanish. I mean, I can get by. But interestingly, what happened with the results was that of the 551 people that we interviewed, 353 people said that they had ever heard of radon. Now, this is 2 months after that huge news story about those high levels of radon just outside the city limits in Allentown. And so of those 353 people, only 26% identified as Latino. So I wanted to know if perhaps there was some kind of information barrier, some kind of language barrier that perhaps was having this effect on the radon testing that I saw. Certainly, it was really difficult to determine that from this one survey because I couldn't really tell if it had to do with education level or the fact that they had never negotiated a home sale because they were predominantly renters. And I'm sure all of those things have something to do with it as well. But for this piece, for this presentation, I'll talk about the prong of the study that occurred because of finding out that there was a language barrier problem. The first thing I did was I wanted to know if there was information about radon available at the state and local level in Spanish. And the answer was absolutely there was not. That to me was a problem because even if people were aware of radon, if they weren't able to go to a place where they could get information in a language they could understand, then we hit a wall there and we wouldn't be able to encourage them to test. So the good news is there is information available at the state level and local level in Spanish now. So I am very fortunate to live in Pennsylvania because I get to collaborate with some really great people at the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection Radon Division, and that is Denise Blyler and Bob Lewis and Dave Allard, who are incredibly supportive of the work that I'm doing in Allentown. And one of the things that we've accomplished in the past year as a result of my research is that we were able to do a huge communication blast in January of 2020 for Radon Awareness Month. And this involved putting signs on the sides of our buses that went through the whole Lehigh Valley. And here's an example of one. If they say radon causes lung cancer, test your home, save a life. And then a website that I'll get to in a minute where information could be found. Now, those signs were in English on one side and Spanish on the other side, so that, depending on what language you spoke, you would be able to understand what the message was. But we just didn't have signs on the outside of the buses. We also were able to put signs in the bus shelters. And these had a little bit more information about what radon actually was and, how to go about getting rid of it. Those signs were also in Spanish and in English. You can see the Spanish speaking one on the Spanish language one on the right has 3 of my research students standing next to it. These young women were invaluable in helping us pull off this communication program. And not only were the messages in the bus shelters, but they were also inside the buses. So the little things up on the top, while people were sitting there on the bus on their way to work or school, they were able to read some information about radon. The other thing that we did was we've designed a website that contains information in both English and Spanish. And that was the website on those bus signs that people were directed to. And it's radonlehighvalley.org. You can see here that we have a number of different topics. What is radon? How to test your home? Information for healthcare providers. We have a radon brochure. And we also made the information available in Spanish. So you can just hover over each one of those headings and you will get to the Spanish version of that information. Here's an example of one of the pages in Spanish about what radon is and explanation. So another thing that we did was we designed a radon information brochure in both English and Spanish, and we've put them in physicians' offices, mostly pediatricians' offices and family physician, internal medicine physician offices. And, you know, when people are sitting there in the waiting room with nothing to do, these are there available for people to read. We also have a piece of our project trying to reach physicians and establish some kind of change where they would actually have to talk to their, or be required to talk to their patients about testing their homes for radon, just like they talk to their patients about testing their homes for lead. We haven't really pursued that at this point because COVID has kind of taken up all of our time these days, but that's on the back burner and we will pursue that in the future. This is a three-sided pamphlet thing, but I didn't know how to show that on a slide.
And
yes.
We're running out of time.
Okay, and so I just wanted to finish then by telling you that the local news has did a great story on my research at the end of January for Radon Awareness Month, and so the DEP now has Spanish translation on their website. And if you want more information, here is the link to our paper. I've also provided that link in the program for anybody who wants to read more about what we did. And I'd just like to end by thanking the PADEP for funding what I do, and also for the Harry C. Trexler Trust for also funding what I do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chrysan. We truly appreciate it. We look forward to hearing more in the future. All right, guys, up next, we have Lindi Campbell and Kyle Hoylman, both of Kentucky. Kyle is the co-founder of Protect Environmental, and Lindi started her nonprofit organization, Breath of Hope Kentucky, to create a community of support for lung cancer survivors and their families, and raise money for lung cancer in Kentucky that supports organizations dedicated to survivorship. Welcome you both, and I will go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thanks, Don. Most of you already know me, so no need for introductions here. Most of you do not know Lindi, who I count as a friend, and instead of giving Lindi the opportunity to introduce herself, I'm going to actually do it through a video. So bear with me. You can see my notes, and here we go.
I've been active and healthy most of my life. But in 2015, a shadow appeared on a routine chest x-ray. Doctors began watching a suspicious spot on my right lung. Although no one initially suspected it was cancer, regular CT scans showed consistent changes to the growth. After 2.5 years of waiting and watching, my pulmonologist at the time suggested it would be in my best interest to have it removed. To Just a few months after my 53rd birthday, I woke up to learn the nodule was not only cancer, but the surgeon made the difficult decision to remove 2 lobes of my right lung to ensure I had the best chance for the cancer not to return. It was a long recovery, but I was determined to regain as much of my mobility and stamina as possible. I also had a lot of work to do on the emotional toll the diagnosis and loss of lung took on me. I didn't know there were other causes of lung cancer besides smoking until I was diagnosed. And I did not know the state I was born and raised in ranks #1 for lung cancer cases and deaths. I knew I had to find ways to bring more attention to the disease, raising awareness that anyone can get lung cancer and helping erase the stigma associated with this diagnosis were all an effort to push forward for change in order to impact and improve the survival statistics of this disease. My life and the future of so many others depended on it. Over time, I saw opportunities to take my story and my advocacy to bigger platforms that would reach more people. From doing television interviews and presentations to starting my own lung cancer organization. We hosted a fundraising event and donated money to local lung cancer initiatives. I was beginning to see the momentum growing. Along this journey, I've had an amazing support system and continue to meet some incredible survivors and families who have lost loved ones to this disease. More than anything, aside from educating others, I wanted to build a lung cancer community. I want the stories of lung cancer survivors, past and present, to be told because we are the face and the journey behind all the statistics of this disease. We are the fighters. We are moms and dads, sisters and brothers, sons and daughters. Our life and our future depend on the progress of research and medicine.
Welcome, Lindi.
Hello.
So let's jump right in. I think everybody knows who you are now. So tell us what happened to cause you to be here with us today.
Well, it's called 2 words, personal experience. I don't try to attack this from any other angle than knowing what my life was like before this diagnosis, living on the sidelines of life, not having any idea this disease could happen to you, to jumping right into a diagnosis overnight. And I think one of the reasons I'm so passionate about messages like this on bigger platforms is really helping people understand that we're not really sitting around getting it. We don't really get it. We don't really realize that this truly can happen to us until we see people we know and love who have experienced it. I've dealt firsthand with what it feels like to not be seen as a typical lung cancer patient. And in fact, for over a year and a half, well over a year and a half, my original pulmonologist basically just as he watched the nodule grow, just kept saying, no, you know, it's a very rare chance that it would be cancer. If it was, it's very slow growing. And quite honestly, on the last appointment, I had my husband go with me because I said, I really feel silly. I sit there and really wonder why we're continuing to follow this. So at that point, when my husband saw it firsthand, we just, says I went completely quiet on the screen.
You're good.
Okay. So, that's just a very frightening feeling. And that the doctors you trust with that information. Unfortunately, I did go on and get a second opinion and even a third opinion, which did lead to my surgery and thankfully my early diagnosis. But that's really why I'm here passionate about these messages, because we're in our bubble thinking people get it, but do they really? Are they really hearing it? I know I didn't before I was diagnosed.
Well, we're glad you're here with us today. Our session is titled Amplifying the Radon Message. What does that mean to you?
Well, one thing when I think about the word amplify, you can think of it in terms of making your message louder, or you can think of it in terms of how your message is being relayed. So to me, if your message is believable, it's being amplified. So what are the messages that you're putting out there, and how are you putting them out there? Believability to me means that they have to feel it, relate to it, understand it, and then wanting to put all that into action. So I think we want to make sure that term is clear, because you can be loud, you can be on various platforms, you can have a message you believe in, but are other people believing in it, the people that need to hear it? And so that's what I think is real important in understanding what that looks like to the people that aren't in this business, and how are we able to really reach them into their living rooms, into their daily lives with this message.
Your intro video, a lot of amplification there. So tell us more about some of the things that you've done, and in particular, what messaging have you as a lung cancer survivor found to be the most successful?
Well, I started this journey basically with the overall message of one conversation at a time. Obviously, we can't reach a lot of people person to person. I take that advantage anytime I can, but one conversation at a time really means, are you having a conversation with this person? Again, are they hearing it? Are you motivating them to do something? What is that end action you want from that person? And so I had to start out, originally I was just Lindi Campbell, lung cancer survivor. So as that, you're at the mercy of anybody that is willing to hear your message and know what it's like from your side of the table to live through this. And again, I don't try to be an expert in any other platform other than I know what most people in this business don't know. And it is from the time you hear that diagnosis, when all your questions are why, how, when. And luckily, because my diagnosis was earlier than some people, I was able to reflect on that and find out, how did I not know this? So I did it one conversation at a time, and then realized once I got that momentum to really get it on an organization platform so that I could be up there in the game with everybody else who was trying to get these messages out.
The stigma of lung cancer. Tell us about your experience with dealing with and overcoming this stigma.
Well, the stigma basically prevented a doctor from even knowing that I could get lung cancer. So that's a direct impact on my future, my livelihood, my diagnosis, and my survivorship. So ultimately, that's how the stigma affected me. From a personal level, I always can say, well, I never smoked, and use that platform. But how sad is it that somebody has to battle this disease and then fight against somebody who immediately stops talking about it when you say lung cancer, because they go right into that stigma. Oh, you caused it yourself, you're to blame. Nobody's to blame. And I don't know of any cancer that's put out there like that, where you have no one out there listening as soon as they hear the words lung cancer. It's just so unfair. And I hope that as more and more people who've never smoked or quit smoking years ago join this talk and this fight, we can water down that stigma and help people understand anybody truly can get this disease.
Shifting to policy, how can we amplify the radon message and amplify that message within our federal and state policymakers to better protect building occupants that are being exposed to radon?
Well, the way I look at it is statistics are one thing, but are the statistics really motivating change? You can see a percentage. A lot of times I was referred to as a 1% or a 20% I'm not a percentage. I'm not a statistic. I'm a real life person that was affected by this disease. And I hear of stories every single day of late diagnoses because of the stigma, lack of early detection testing. So when we're looking at trying to really amplify that message on a federal and state level, they need to hear from us. They need to see us. They need to, once again, this needs to be believable. Again, statistics are just statistics to a lot of people that aren't feeling this disease from a personal experience. But when they hear somebody like me in my story, they can see it in other people besides just going straight to that stigma. Oh, well, I never smoked. The people I know and love never smoked. I mean, so they can't get lung cancer. You're tapping back into a whole new dynamic of people to truly understand. Unless they feel it, I really think they're just stuck in not believing it.
How do you think amplifying the radon message with an emphasis on radon as the leading cause of lung cancer among non-smokers, how does that messaging help to end the stigma of lung cancer?
Well, to be honest, we all know we have a long, long way to go. But the important thing is that we find avenues to keep the momentum of that message, because we all know if we don't stay on top of it, it just dies out. And one of the best things I think we can do is really break down the bubble barriers. We're all kind of in our own bubble of our work and what we do, but how are we reaching across to other messages to incorporate a broader scale when it comes to talking about lung cancer? You have the CDC giving its messages, the EPA giving their messages, Radon theirs, and so forth. So we're really still all kind of in a little bit of a bubble. And something like this, when you bring my story in or the work of my organization, you're opening those lines of communication and you're busting that bubble, so to speak, and opening the doors for a broader conversation. And once it gets talked about on all those various scales, hopefully we can just sweep that cookie cutter diagnosis, away and really concentrate on the big picture of all the causes of lung cancer.
What can we do, our community, the radon community? How do we support survivors such as yourself who want to share their stories? You share your story. Some survivors choose not to. They choose not to share their story. But for folks like yourself, how do we best support you?
Really providing avenues like this for us to be able to share our stories, and in some ways for me to be able to be that resource for some of those survivors to feel more comfortable with sharing their stories. That's what I try to do. Just see what each of them are comfortable with. But the way I look at it is even physicians still don't understand this. So our messages have to become more common in the realm of talking about lung cancer as it is compared to radon exposure, other types of exposures, these genetic mutations. All of those messages have to be in the mix constantly. And I say it starts with what's more believable than to hear from the survivors themselves who have lived it, breathed it, dealt with every aspect when it comes to having to deal with this disease.
Right on. What would you like to share with us in closing today? Is there anything additional that you'd like to share with the audience?
We need you. We need all of you. All of us come at this from some sort of angle where we have even an influence beyond what we're doing in our jobs. And so just ask yourself, is what's happening out there, would these messages have reached me if I wasn't in this business? And if you pull yourself out of that position and you look at that, great things are being done. So this is not to discount any of the magnificent work that's being done out there. I'm just saying, from me, having been in that position, why wasn't it reaching me? Why weren't these messages reaching me? And so we all have something we can do more than what we're already doing to contribute to this message. And I'll just end by saying, you know, your messages out there aren't enough unless people see them, hear them, understand them, and most importantly, believe them. So are you hitting that message from all of those angles? Then you can draw people in to do more about it for their own health and the health of the people they love. And that's when they're going to be promoted to action.
Very good.
Much.
Well, thank you for joining us today and sharing your story. Nicole, Don, I think, you know, it doesn't happen often, but I'm giving back 2 or 3 minutes of our time.
Thank you so much, Kyle. And thank you so much, Lindi, for sharing your story with us. Kind of wish we would have kind of told people to grab a tissue before the video started. I know I certainly had to use my sleeve. So your story was beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. I know personally losing 2 people I loved very much to lung cancer. I know the struggle you went through and the journey. So it does. I look forward to hearing more from you, and thank you so much for just being an advocate and sharing your message, because it takes an army to make change happen. And this industry truly thanks you and appreciates you.
Absolutely.
So, all right, everyone. Okay, I don't know how I come back from this, but let's open it up for some questions and answers. I hope that maybe Nicole will help me moderate just a little bit, because I can only see what Zoom is showing me.
And that's what I'm seeing right now. So Dallas, do you have the moderator stick for this session? You might not.
No, I was not prepared. I thought Amy was on that. Let me get over there. I think she's
For Amy.
take another call. So hold on.
I could take control at Dallas if you need me to, but if you want to, please feel free. But Chrysan, thank you so much. I didn't get to thank you as well, but we look forward to reading your paper and reading more of your research as it continues to come to light. You know, I know I have a family member very close to Allentown up there. They had built a brand new home, put in a passive system, had no idea. And he's my brother, so I about wrung his neck. When I heard that, I said, you better get that taken care of immediately. You know, had him seal everything, get his system active, but his house was dangerously high. And even living as close to Allentown as he was, had no idea. So I really do appreciate what you're doing to get the message out there. I hope this message is far reaching and more people pay attention. So.
Well, Dallas is looking for those questions. I just wanted to say to Lindi that in November of last year, I actually met with a group of pulmonary oncologists at the hospital. And it was really disheartening, because one of them actually said he had never even heard of this until he had just moved there the year before to Center Valley, and found out all about this. I mean, it was so frustrating for me, and I'm not generalizing this to every pulmonary oncologist, but the ones that I met with were really not inspired to take up the charge or do anything. And as you were talking, I'm thinking about the stigma that you were talking about, and I'm like, yeah, I saw that with those. And there was a group of 12 doctors that I was presenting to. And really, one of them said to me, by the time they get to us, it's too late. Because I said, do you talk to your patients about radon? And that one surgeon said, no, by the time they get to me, it's too late anyway. I could not believe it. And I said, well, don't you talk to them about smoking? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, well, why wouldn't you talk to them about radon? So I think we need a complete shift in the medical field, you know, or we're not going to get anywhere.
But it has to work backwards almost, because until we start implementing some laws that start to raise eyebrows, like, oh, well, if it's a law, it must be more important. If we start, you start there, and then you start educating it's just got to start almost backwards sometimes, so that people begin to believe it.
Yeah.
And that's really what I try to do with my story too, is just making them see me, and then they can see the disease beyond that stigma, because the stigma affects people who don't smoke, you know, as much as it affects people who smoke, because it hinders our early detection.
Right. That's right. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more about policy. I'm totally on board with changing the laws. Got to start there.
I have a question for Chrysan from Curtis. And he says he hopes to replicate your demographic analysis in his area. The zip codes with high percentage Hispanic were also high percentage renters. What levers are available in Pennsylvania to cause landlords to be responsive to tenants' radon test results?
So what was this? What was the second word in that sentence? And I didn't hear the question. What
levers?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good question. And the answer is there aren't any. There just simply are not, at least in where I am in Allentown. We met with the building and codes people. Currently, there is no mechanism in place. And that's what the renters would tell us once we would, we did focus groups after this and after this research. And they're like, we're helpless. Even if we do the test, what do we do with that information? Our landlord will just say, well, go live somewhere else, because they're not required in any way to do any kind of testing or mitigating. And neither are our schools or our daycares. I mean, we have really poor laws in Pennsylvania.
Okay, another question from Dr. Garamani, who's in California, who is asking, I think it's open to either of you, with helping to get the message through to people that are in areas that assume perhaps they don't have radon in their area, like the assumption in California or Texas or places like that, where it's just not believed very much.
Yeah, I wish I had the answer to that, because we're kind of going through that with COVID too. If you can't see it and you can't smell it and you don't feel like it's affecting you, then it's not real, right? And so I don't know, except to keep beating the drum and doing personal narratives like what we just heard and just blasting the message out there. But I do think it does come back to policy. Until we get federal and state laws that require mandatory testing and mitigation, people are going to think it's not that important. Lindy's absolutely right, because they're going to say, if it was that important, the government would make me do it.
Okay, I have a question for Lindi, and this is from Carly, and she wants to know at what point and who suggested to you to test your home for radon, and what was the radon level?
Well, once again, we went backwards because of the diagnosis was the only reason. And I think it just came with the territory. Once you're diagnosed, that question, the whys, like, how did this happen? I knew I'd grown up around secondhand smoke, but my bedroom was in the basement of my home where I grew up, and my mom happens to still live there. So we did test the basement and the area where my bedroom was. It tested at 3.8. However, I grew up in that bedroom, exposed to secondhand smoke my whole growing up. So there's that combination of young lungs exposed to those toxins, the combination of secondhand smoke and radon. So I like to talk sometimes too about the double danger, so to speak, of radon. And we only tested my mom's home once. It's a little hard for her at 84 years old to see me diagnosed and grow up in a household of smokers and be the only one, the youngest and the only one to get lung cancer. So we left it at that, and she's never down there anymore. But that's really why we pretty much have a pretty good indication that a lot of that exposure is what damaged my lungs when I was younger.
Okay, this is for Lindi or Kyle or both. People are wanting to know where they can get the URL to Lindy's video.
I have a lot of social media sites. Everything I do is Breath of Hope KY or Breath of Hope Kentucky. Be sure to add in Kentucky because there are a lot of Breath of Hope, great Breath of Hope organizations, but mine is pretty specific to Kentucky and to what I do. So my website is bohky.org. And then all of my social media platforms are Breath of Hope Kentucky. So that video should be on there. We're updating my website and stuff like that as my messages get on bigger and bigger platforms, but in any of those platforms, and it will be on there.